tell the truth. And of course, what we learn about is the Watergate scandal, and this is what made the Washington Post the Washington Post. Deep Throat, and this person who we never knew who it was that was giving information that ultimately led to Nixon's resignation. Let's speak about President Nixon, because I'm starting to think a lot differently about that now.
Yes, we have an entire chapter in our book on Bob Woodward, who I consider the chief mockingbird. When I came out with my story to blow the whistle on what the agency had done when my family was poisoned and the house was broken into and they painted chemicals on the ceiling, I contacted a reporter who was going to meetings with former agency people, and so I called him and he took the story, but he kept putting me off. For 30 days we went back and forth, and I said, "Are you going to publish this or not?" He goes, "Well, what about this?" And he kept asking me questions, the answer to which would be classified information, which means I could be wrapped up. So finally I said, why are you doing this? I'm not going to tell you anything classified. He goes, "Well, my editor, he's pressuring me to do it," and he was miserable. So that's why I'm not mentioning his name, because he was just an in-between. Well, guess who the Washington Post editor was? It was Bob Woodward. And it turns out the Washington Post went directly to the CIA and reported my contact and exactly what I told them. Turns out Bob Woodward was an intelligence community official connected to the CIA Naval Intelligence going all the way back to the Nixon administration. He briefed Alexander Haig with top secret briefings, and he and Haig worked together as a kind of behind-the-scenes coup to get rid of Richard Nixon. Now that may sound crazy, but we have the documentation in Twilight of the Shadow Government to prove that was a coup against Richard Nixon, and that Bob Woodward himself was involved in that. And I remember when we were on the 7th floor, when we were protecting CIA Director William Casey, Woodward would come and visit all the time. And William Casey hated the press, except for Bob Woodward. And he'd always clear him right in, and they'd go behind closed-door meetings, and we were all like, what the heck? Well, it turns out Bob Woodward, with some of the information Casey gave him, publishes Veil, The Secret Wars of the CIA. And in that book, he says that he was able to get into Bill Casey's hospital room when he was terminally ill and get him to admit to his involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, which was a felony, basically. Well, that's a complete fabrication. I was one of the agents that occupied the hot seat outside of Casey's room. Woodward did try to get in, and the agents gracefully caught him and showed him the exit, and he never came back. Plus, the brain tumor had affected Casey's brain, especially the area of speech, so he couldn't even talk. So that's a complete fabrication. Woodward has concealed all of his intelligence community jobs and positions that he had going back to Alexander Haig. He's concealed all of that. He makes it look like he came into the Washington Post, and then within 6 months he gets Watergate, and he gets a direct connection to the then deputy director of the FBI, who turns out to be Deep Throat and was disgruntled and just started feeding Woodward information right off the bat. Why him? Well, everybody knew that he had a clearance and he had connections to U.S. intelligence. So we have an entire piece referenced and documented on Bob Woodward as the poster child of Mockingbird, and it goes all the way back to there.
So what you're essentially alleging then, and this is very much what I've come to understand, it makes me still feel so foolish as a student to believe these almost like Hollywood production type stories. A brave journalist running to get the information out, standing up against the deep state. They are the fourth estate. It's like, no, they are the deep state.
That's right.
What you're alleging then is that what happened is a coup was executed against a duly elected president of the United States.
Yes, and I think we pretty much proved that in the book with documentation. Yeah.
And then, of course, people listening to this are going to be going, wait, but as soon as Donald Trump got into office, the first time, Bob Woodward was the guy that was writing a book about Donald Trump. And just a few days ago, Donald Trump issued a statement against Bob Woodward saying that that Bob Woodward was writing another book and lying about clearances that he never had and access to the administration that he didn't have. That would suggest to people that perhaps the state is going after Donald Trump in the same manner.
What was Woodward's most recent book, Fear? And of course, it's always negative about Donald Trump because he's a mockingbird. And the CIA specifically hates Donald Trump because he's rattling their cage. And the CIA will do anything, and I mean anything, to survive, self-perpetuate itself. So he went after Trump in his book, and he is now a well-known fabricator. I don't think you can read any of Bob Woodward's book and believe everything that's in there. Now, the one exception is Bill Casey leaked classified information selectively to Woodward in the book Veil, because Casey wanted that out to the American public. And that Woodward took that. What he does is he takes things and makes himself look legitimate, and then he puts a lie in there. That's his MO. And he did that in his recent book, Fear. But it's always against anyone that challenges the intelligence community or the national security state. It's always an attack on that, and of course, Donald Trump.
Yeah. You know, it's actually really interesting because Tulsi Gabbard being announced, it seems to have rattled the cages of the deep state.
Sure
And
has.
for me, the marker of that is I view Nikki Haley to be just an entire deep state clone. She's just always talking about war, war, war. Let's go to war with Iran. Let's go to war with everyone. And she really came out against Tulsi Gabbard in a huge way.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because everything she was saying sounded to me like, this makes me like Tulsi Gabbard more. She's like, Tulsi Gabbard thinks that Julian Assange should be pardoned and Edward Snowden should be pardoned. And I'm going, do you understand what you're actually saying to the American people? Is that people that reveal information about the deep state should essentially be tried and life in prison, and she calls this protecting our interests.
And Nikki's been connected to the military-industrial complex for years. She's a deep stater from the word go. Obviously, Trump knows that, the team knows that, and that's why she doesn't have any position. But, you got to admire the poetic justice, because they had Tulsi Gabbard on a terrorist watch list. They were following her wherever she went for no reason other than her opinions on Ukraine and other things. And now, all of a sudden, she's in charge of them as over DHS. I mean, you got to love that. And that's the kind of thing we need, is people from the outside like that, especially people that have been attacked by the shadow government deep state that are now going back in to really clean some house. First time in my entire career I've seen this actually possible. And somebody pinch me and wake me up, because I think I'm dreaming.
This podcast is very interesting and informative. Candace Owens' interviews are insightful in the new independent media.
So Kari Lake's failure in Arizona has pushed her out of the power grid. Very fortunate that she was denied a position that would have eaten Arizona from within like cancer.
So Richard Nixon, whom, by the way, was a very popular president, won by a landslide, was overthrown by deep state known as Bob Woodward. All that historical Watergate fiasco was just a black operation.
I don't know if this is going to change anything, but here is the opportunity for our new administration to bring to light the upheaval that's been widely known to everyone outside our bubble.